Do you have any opinion on Howard Zinn and the people's history of the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a strong one for me. Listen, Howard Zinn, for people who don't know, Zinn's motivation was to try to write a counterpoint to what I always call, my shorthand word for it is 1950s high school history textbooks. The rah rah American flag, sanitized sort of history. And I think Zinn said this in the introduction to his people's history, that he was not trying to write a balanced history. He's trying to fill the other side of the scale up with evidence to balance things out. But when you read Zinn, it's profoundly unbalanced. Again, he set out and I fall into this category too. I'll get the same sort of people critiquing me for things, and I'll say, well, but I told you ahead of time, what I was trying to do. And they'll say, yes, but what if you're the only history people get? And it's a good point. If you're reading Zinn as though he's going to be the person you read, you're getting a very one-sided view of things. That was Zinn's goal. So when I read him, I do think he's profoundly unfair, but he's not trying to be fair. The facts that he pulls out are true facts, and yet when you read it, you get this feeling by the time you're done that all these people in his story were evil and that these cultures were awful. It's the opposite. Instead of the red men being the savages and the white men being the civilizers from the 1950s history book, the red men are the noble savages and the white men are the rapers and destroyers. And truthfully, what I love about the more modern histories is that they're doing such a wonderful job of reminding you that everybody on all sides of the story are people, and they're responding in ways that people tend to respond. But when Zinn wrote that book, that was not the norm. And so I cut him a lot of slack because I understand what he was trying to do. At the same time, when I read him, I find it difficult personally, but that's my own bias, and he's perfectly justified in trying to have done what he did.
That's a very fair-minded assessment, I would say. I'm glad to hear you say that. Because Zinn, one of the things that Zinn was addressing is a point you raised earlier, which is that history, as it's presented to us, is really only representative of a fraction of the top percentage of any given society. Because, as you said, it's the educated, which is by definition the wealthy, almost always men, almost always white. So I think his enterprise, which was, hey, let's look at this from the perspective of women, blacks, Indians, slaves, whatever, the poor, was an important thing and an important corrective. And I think you're right. He wasn't setting out to be balanced. He was setting out to create balance in some sense.